Begin. So what is up, everybody? This is your boy Bernard. This is GW University. We have a special episode 13 about the recent LSU Iowa women's basketball controversy. And so we do have two experts on our episode today, but let me give y'all a quick summary of what happened, and then we'll go and introduce our guests. So as you all know, LSU's women's basketball reigned supreme as the 2023 national champions, with their star athlete, Angel Reese, in the spotlight. And alongside the storyline is the meteoric rise of sharpshooter Caitlin Clark, who this season is averaging just a little under 28 points per game, which is second in the nation, and making over 3.7 shots from beyond the arc at a 38.9% clip. For context, many have compared her to Golden State's Steph Curry, who in college himself, during his senior year, averaged 28.6 points per game and making over 3.8 shots from beyond the arc at an eerily similar percentage of 38.7%. Many say that Caitlin Clark was a reason for bringing all this newfound attention into women's college basketball and into women's sports in general. But make no mistake, Angel Reese, who is still a junior and plans to pursue her NCAA eligibility, was a high school McDonald's All-American and was the number 2 overall player in the 2020 and number 1 wing ranked by ESPN. This season, she is averaging a double-double with 23 points per game and over 15.4 rebounds, which earned her national accolades as Player of the Year, First Team All-American, First Team All-SEC, SEC All-Defensive Team, and now National Champion. Both women got nothing but love and respect for each other, despite the trash talking leading up to and right after the national championship game. But as we already know, motherfuckers per usual got some shit to say, particularly about Angel Reese, which leads us to our experts who will talk through us about this controversy. So let's go ahead and start with Brianna, followed by Dr. Ezene. Let us know about yourself, educational background, your research.
Yeah, so hey everyone, I'm Brianna Savage. I grew up in Los Angeles and the Inland Empire, specifically Pomona, California. I went to UCLA for undergrad, was a poli-sci major, and then I went to USC for my master's in education, and now I'm currently at the University of California, Riverside, or UCR, getting my PhD in higher education. Specifically, I research Black college athletes, as well as other underserved student populations. But I am currently involved in projects that discuss like Black college athletes, postgraduate career transitions, Black women college athletes' experiences on primarily white institution campuses, and just talk about the development of Black identity within college athletes. Personally, I'm a huge sports fan, so I love all LA sports. Well, like half of the LA teams. So Lakers, Dodgers, the Rams, and then UCLA. Sometimes I claim USC, but I watch football, basketball, all things sports. And recently I've also been watching more women's sports. So personally, I grew up in a family where we all played sports growing up. But my dad and my stepdad were also college athletes. My dad was a college athlete at UCLA, and my stepdad played at Long Beach State. So sports have just been really big for me. And then I also had experience working at a Division I institution within their athletics department. So I just feel like I come to this work with a great passion for it, for athletes, and for sports in general.
All right, and Dr. Ezene. Thanks, Bri.
Hi, y'all. I am Ezene Ofebu. I'm an assistant professor of educational leadership at Santa Clara University, which is in the Bay Area, just outside of San Jose. I'm originally from Cerritos, California, which is about 30 minutes out of downtown LA without traffic or on a good day. So depending what time you're on the area makes a big difference. And I engage in scholarship around general issues of the intersections of identity in higher education, DE&I, or diversity, equity, inclusion work in higher education, particularly using an organizational lens. So how colleges enact and perform diversity and inclusion and the ways in which that impacts students' experiences. And then I do a lot of work on the intersections of gender and race in college sports, with a specific focus on Black women and girls in their experiences to and through higher education, particularly those at predominantly Division I institutions. So I do a lot of work around there, and also dabble in some work on the intersections of race and ethnicity in higher education. So some current projects that I'm working on include some work around Black women and college athletes at Division I institutions and their experiences in different institutional relationships that they have to have. So interactions with coaches, teammates, academic advisors, et cetera, exploring Black college athlete involvement and what that looks like, considering the different time demands and expectations that are placed on them in the ever-changing landscape of college athletics. And then I'm currently working on a study examining the intersections of race and ethnicity for Black second generation immigrant college students. So I say, for the most part, a lot of the work that I engage in is about and for students who look like me, students who experience environments in the same ways that I do or did when I was an undergraduate student. And that work is really about making these environments more inclusive, so that students aren't experiencing the same gendered racism that I did as an undergraduate student. So my personal experience with sport, I am not athletic. I am tall, I'm 5'10". I look like an athlete. People ask me all the time, like, oh, did you play volleyball? Did you play basketball? No, I just look like I did, thank God. But I'm not athletic at all. I have no athletic skill, but I am an avid consumer, similar to Bree. I grew up watching the Lakers. I'm a very diehard Laker fan. Like, for folks who grew up with MJ, I grew up with Kobe, and that's how tight that relationship is for me. So I don't acknowledge the other NBA team in LA. Sports has always been a big part of my family history as well. My older sister and my younger brother, both college athletes, played college basketball. So we've just always been a basketball family. So very engaged with that area of sports. I do watch some football depending on who's playing. I cheer for SC when they're competing. I didn't even say where I went to undergrad, or where I went to school anyway. But yeah, I cheer for my alma maters when they're competing. And yeah, that's it. That's how I come to this work. I come to this work as a fan. I come to this work as someone who has supported athletes in a professional way in the past. And yeah, that's what it has looked like for me.
Well, thanks you both for agreeing to be on this podcast, even with little time to prepare. But I'm glad you both were able to make it today and talk about this very timely and even arguably timeless issue here, because we hear a lot of things about women's sports when compared to men's sports, for instance, with the gender pay, for instance, and those inequities. And then now we're seeing these dynamics happen with college athletes, especially with the whole Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark incident, right? Which really wasn't an incident, but the public decided to make a spectacle out of it. Traditionally or usually we would just expect athletes to have trash talking as a part of the game, but now we have different dynamics that are making this a social issue now. So as a refresher to those at home, there was a lot of trash talking leading up to the women's basketball championship game. And then now the victor, who happened to be Angel Reese, so congrats to her for winning the national championship with LSU, and decided to do a similar gesture that Caitlin did, which was this first. And now, she added this, which means she got the ring, she got the championship. So what are your thoughts on everybody's opinions about their celebratory gestures, and what can we make about it moving forward? So I guess we could start with Brie.
Okay, yeah. So I thought it was just really interesting to see all of the backlash that Angel Reese was getting. The ring gesture specifically, I remember Aaron Donald did it because I'm a Rams fan. So when we won the Super Bowl, not this year, but last year, That was a great gesture for me as a fan, and I saw people reposting it and things like that. So I just wanted to point that out just to show that it's very common in sports for athletes to do that when they are about to win a championship. But I think it's very interesting just to see the way Aaron Donald was praised for it and Angel Reese wasn't. But then specifically the other John Cena gesture that Caitlin Clark had done previously against, who was it again? South Carolina. I think they beat South Carolina the week before or the game before. How Caitlin Clark in that game was praised for it, for being competitive and working really hard and being a great shooter. And then Angel Reese goes and does the same gesture the next week when winning the championship, and she's ridiculed. I believe she was called like trash and ghetto, just different words for doing the same exact thing Caitlin Clark had done previously. And I just thought it was unfair for someone to do exactly the same thing and get different treatment.
So I guess I want to follow up, and this is, you know, for both of you to respond to. So I also did see some things online about South Carolina, right? About similar comments that were being made about LSU's women's basketball team. And so this is a team that didn't even win the championship, but was competitive against Caitlin Clark's team, right? As you've mentioned, they played Iowa in the tournament. So what would you both say about that piece? Because now we have like someone who's in the spotlight with Angel Reese being on LSU's basketball team, and we were saying maybe perhaps that's why that's getting attention. But then there's also South Carolina, who was also being pinned against Iowa in opposition to their team. And so how would you comment about that dynamic? I guess, Dr. Ezine, if you want to talk about that now.
Yeah, I think you have to look at the racial composition of these teams, right? LSU is a predominantly Black team. Iowa is a predominantly white team, which is rare, especially at the Division I level, because these teams are, for the most part, overrepresented with Black women, right? Like Black women make up a good part of Division I women college basketball players. So that racial dynamic is already at play, right? So there's that. And then on top of that, I'm thinking about after South Carolina lost that game to Iowa, how Coach Don Staley said, like, watch what y'all are saying about my team, like, watch how you talk about my team, right? Because for the entire season, coaches, the media, folks were calling them bullies, right? This predominantly Black team, they were calling them bullies. They were saying that they're aggressive, they're aggressive, right? That's all coded racial language. Like, what are you saying when you're calling this team, this predominantly Black team, aggressive, right? You're equating it to historically situated brute stereotypes and caricatures about Black women. So there's that. So I definitely think there's some correlation between how South Carolina has been discussed in the media and how Angel Reese was being labeled as a classless piece of shit, as an effing idiot, right? Even after the South Carolina game, there was someone on Twitter, I can't remember who it is, and I hate that I can't find the tweet, but someone tweeted, "I blame the eyelashes," right? Commenting on the South Carolina's physical appearance as a reason why they lost the game, right? Aaliyah Boston is people are constantly calling attention to the fact that Aaliyah Boston is going to wear colorful braids, right? She's going to use her hair as a means to express herself. And that only happens with Black women. That does not happen, or at least I don't see it happening with white women athletes at the Division I level. I don't know if y'all have seen it. But yeah, we have to call a thing a thing. Race is a factor in the ways that these teams are discussed, the ways that these players are discussed and described. So that's just a piece that's not going anywhere.
So this reminds me of two past instances of something similar. So the first one being in the NBA, if y'all watched the Blazers back in the day, they used to call them the Jail Blazers because their full name was the Trailblazers, but it was a predominantly Black team and they called them the Jail Blazers. But I think there was also something that was said that none of them even had been incarcerated or been in jail. So that was, another racialized instance of a predominantly Black team being just being called out of their name, right? And then the second example, which we all discussed prior, was Sha'Carri Richardson, right? She was nothing but, bullied from the online sports world about just her celebrating, even though she herself was an LSU women's national champion and just recently ran a 10.54, even if it was in fact when aided time. She ran a 10.54, which is number 3, I believe, in under all conditions. And yet people still had something to say that, she's doping and whatnot, but there's no proof about that, right? And so it's very unfortunate that Black women have to endure this time and time again, in all parts of society, but even more so in sports where they bust their ass and win a national championship and still get all this negative press. And so that leads us to the next question, which is, so leading up to this, I'm not going to lie, we all can, I guess, a lot of us can agree that Caitlin Clark was the primary reason a lot of us tuned into the national championship. She was shooting lights out, right? But ultimately the victor was Angel Reese, and yet she was the one who got the negativity out of this. So I guess I wanted to say was this whole women's basketball game getting top ranking views that might as well propel women's sports to the forefront of media attention because of all this. But yet there was a lot of gender motivated expectations and double standards related to a lot of these instances of sportsmanship, competition, and, like we mentioned earlier, self-expression, right? And we talked earlier about some of these gender-motivated double standards as well. When we, think about male athletes who were in similar situations, such as Bird and Magic, right? In their championship, where Magic was the champion, or yes, the Black athlete Magic was a champion and Bird lost, but they didn't get the same scrutiny, right? For trash talking, having a career out of it. So it's very unfortunate situation. But what do y'all have to say about the whole double standard regarding the whole sportsmanship and competitiveness about that especially came from this LSU Iowa situation?
Sorry, before I forget this thought, it was kind of linked to the last question. I did want to mention South Carolina's season was a really great season. I believe they were undefeated till they lost to Iowa. And you were all talking about how their team was majority Black and they were getting a lot of scrutiny and negative comments towards them. It made me think of the UConn team that was beating everybody every single year. I don't think their team was majority Black, and I never heard those types of stereotypes or remarks from them, like being bullies, even though every single year they were going undefeated at one point or losing like one game. And so I just wanted to make that comparison because I feel like it was just really like saddening for me to see like a team doing so well, especially with the Black woman coach. But UConn, like who had been doing well for so many years, never got that kind of negative attention. And then their coach is also a white male. So I want to bring that up. But to your second question, yeah, the gender difference is just something that's always been around. I saw a lot of comments about people saying she was classless. They called her a slut, a hoe, just things that you don't see people saying about men in sports when they're being competitive. And then somebody was saying like she needs to act more like a lady. But I'm like, we're playing a sport. Like, how do you play a sport like a lady? Like, we're all competitors. So I see the differences and I don't agree with them. I feel like everybody's competitive, right? So women shouldn't be under this lens where they have to be perfect all the time. They have to look a certain way. They have to celebrate a certain way in order to be respected. It just shows like the gender difference, and it's concerning to me.
Just to add on to that, I engage in Black Twitter a lot. And I think something that I find particularly funny, especially now that the women's tournament drew record-breaking numbers, is that the reason that folks give for not watching the WNBA, not watching women's basketball at the college level is because it's not interesting. It's not exciting. They don't dunk. They don't do X, Y, Z. They don't do all this stuff. But now all of a sudden there's trash talk. And now it's sexy to talk about women's basketball, right? It's sexy to report on what's going on in women's basketball. So like even there, like there's a little bit of that interest convergence, right? Like it is of our interest to talk about this current topic because it's what everybody is talking about. It's what everybody is watching. So I feel it's important to point that out, right? Like folks are tuning in because it's interesting, right? People are talking about it. People are engaging in dialogue about it, all but in a negative way for Angel Reese. But people are still talking about it in ways that they weren't talking about it 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And a lot of that has to do with Caitlin Clark, yes. But I also think a lot of that has to do with South Carolina's women's team, right? And the leadership of Dawn Staley and the advocacy of Dawn Staley in making it known that it's women's basketball against everybody, right? So kind of that work to change those narratives, I think, is really important. But to go back to your original question about these double standards, sports are already this very masculine space, right? And women's presence in this space is already an anomaly, right? Like, oh, you're a baller, like that's strange, right? I don't know how to place you unless you are a woman who presents more masculine, right? Unless you are not the girly girl, right? I can't place you. So to Bree's point, when women act in or engage in behaviors that have historically been associated with male athletes, right? Trash talk, defending each other aggressively, right? Like showing passion, like it's weird, right? You're not supposed to behave like this. You're supposed to shoot the ball and behave and go about your merry way, right? Like there's no room for women to express themselves and be passionate in the same ways that men have been praised for, right? So it kind of all roads lead to that sports being this very male space, right? So yeah, I think it's all kind of situated in the history of sport.
So I think my next point, I believe we've mentioned that Angel Reese and perhaps even South Carolina, they were all being labeled as bullies. But the irony of all this is all of those in an attempt to point out that their bullies are the ones bullying them, right? And describing them. And then there was a recent interview, or recent interviews, I should say, but at least there was one, I believe it was on a major network. I believe it might have been ESPN, where Caitlin Clark spoke on the whole incident between her and Angel Reese. And we know from both sides that both of them got nothing but love and respect for each other, but yet one is getting more scrutiny than the other. And so when Clayton Clark was on, there was an interesting comment that I saw that was saying that, you know, Caitlin Clark, in her explaining and trying to end this quote unquote beef, was being viewed as the hero of this situation. But what was being overlooked was the fact that Angel Reese was doing the exact same thing and just talking about just her being happy for the other and being happy for herself and being a champion and whatnot. So there's a lot of double standards again being at play. So what are y'all thoughts on that situation where Caitlin Clark was being put in a more positive spotlight, even though both were attempting to make the most out of the situation and display, you know, sportsmanship, which was counter to what was being labeled for Angel as in being classless, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it just kind of shows the way that white supremacy exists in America's structure. So Caitlin Clark being a white woman basketball player is kind of considered the standard in people's eyes, whether she should be or not. And so anything that deviates from what she does is considered negative, right? And so because Caitlin Clark decided to say that it was okay, she was still looked at as a hero. But I don't think, like, I thought that it was weird because no matter what she does no wrong. If she's talking mess to other teams, then it's considered okay, and she's a hero and she's a competitor for this the sport. But then when Angel Reese does the same thing, she's vilified and considered a villain. So Caitlin Clark was trying to defend Angel Reese's actions, basically saying that they're both competitors, but yet she's still looked at as a hero because she's the standard or what people want to see. It just shows like the racism that exists, in my opinion. But more specifically, like if you even look at their statistics and what they've accomplished, I was talking about this earlier, how Angel Reese got most outstanding player in the tournament. She averaged a double-double this season. I believe it was 23 points, 15 rebounds a game. And then in this specific game, she missed a few shots, but she still had 15 points and 10 rebounds. So she had a double-double. And I saw a lot of comments about how she wasn't even good. She was trash. She got carried by her other teammates. LSU didn't need her. And I just feel like it shows that no matter what a Black woman does, how successful she is, how successful her season is in this context, she's still looked at as a villain, right? In comparison to her white counterpart, Caitlin Clark, who also did have a great game. But like the gap is not as big as people are trying to make it seem as far as their statistics or their contribution to the team. Yeah, so I just feel like it's just looking at Caitlin Clark as a hero, but looking at Angel Reese as a villain is problematic in itself, and it just shows like how white supremacy plays out in society.
Yeah, I think Bree, I think you said that perfectly. I think there were two, and still are two, kind of dominant narratives or depictions that are at play here, right? The angry Black woman and Angel Reese, and then the white savior in Caitlin Clark. And these are not narratives that either of these women have spoken to. Like if you listen to their interviews, like they have said things that are very counter to the ways in which they're being depicted, right? But because it's what's getting clicks, right? It's what's getting people engaged. That's what's being pushed, right? We're going to position Angel Clark as the angry Black woman, and every headline, every tweet, everything is going to be to fit that narrative. While here Caitlin Clark comes and says, like, stop doing that, y'all. And all of a sudden, like, oh, white savior, she's coming in to save the day. And that's not necessarily to say that that's how she viewed, right, speaking out in defense of Angel Reese. That's to say that that is how the media and consumers of sport are taking that to, like, that's how they're making meaning of it. Like, here she comes to save the day. So yeah, Bree said it perfectly.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic. And so traditionally you would expect championship teams to be invited to the White House, but this time it was a little different. And so just for clarification here, the situation was President Biden did in fact exclusively invite LSU, but the First Lady decided to also want to invite Iowa, the losing team, into the White House as a part of the ceremony. So how do we go from here? Like, what do we make out of this whole thing about, you know, sportsmanship? Both played hard, but yet traditionally you would only have the championship team go. So how does this play into this whole dynamic here that we have been talking about?
I'll just say, if the championship game was South Carolina versus LSU, I don't think both teams would have been invited. I'll put it that way. I think, yes, you know, both teams went out and they played their game and the better team won, right? And as years passed, the better team should go to the White House, right? I did not hear anyone from the White House inviting San Diego State to the White House after losing their game. You don't hear you don't hear folks who lose the Super Bowl getting invited to the White House. You don't hear the folks who lose in the NBA Finals being invited to the White House because they played their hearts out. So that should not be the case for women, right? That should not be the case for these teams at the collegiate level. That just doesn't make sense.
Any thoughts on it, Bree?
No, I agree. Yeah, I've never seen that in any sport, any professional sport or college sport. So I just thought it was interesting that the dynamic was that Iowa was a majority white team. And suddenly there's this level of like, I don't know what the word is, like remorse for them or pity for them, and wanting to include them. And more specifically, kind of expanding on what Dr. O just said, if Iowa was the team that won, I don't think that anyone would have cared if LSU felt bad about it. So yeah, I feel like the dynamic is just different, and then it shows in people's reactions, the racial dynamic.
So I know this whole discussion is about sports, but let's talk about a very big, important topic here that's been going on in terms of how Black women are depicted in this negative light, right? So we do see how this might even play into health disparities because they are seen as, that could withstand more pain. And hence that's why people tend to be able to be willing to say these negative things. So do you have any final thoughts on that as well, on the danger of viewing Black women as such?
You want to take this one first? You want me to do it?
Go ahead.
I just think there are a lot of examples of like Black women being stereotyped as aggressive or being able to be strong or super independent in people's minds. And so you see it, like you said, with healthcare disparities. You see it in the rap scene with the way that Megan Thee Stallion is talked about all of the time for being tall and I guess thick or whatever people label her as. So when she got shot, there was no remorse for her. It was like more of an attack on her character rather than her being a victim. In the same way that if she wasn't a Black woman, that person probably would have had sympathy given to them due to the circumstances. And then you also brought up Sha'Carri Richardson earlier. Like the focus on the way that she talks or the way that her nails are or her hair is rather than the talent that she has. I just think there are just numerous examples, even in K through 12 space, like the rates that Black girls are suspended in comparison to non-Black girls, and the way that they're like hyper focused on as far as their actions or personality. Yeah, Black women are just usually stereotyped in a negative light, despite what they're achieving on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that and say that I think society at large is threatened by confident, talented, outspoken Black women because that we're not supposed to be all of those things, right? We're not supposed to be confident. We're not supposed to be boastful. We're not supposed to outspokenly let people know that like we the shit sometimes. Like it might not be all the time, but when we the shit, right? So and I think that speaks to what you both were saying, like Black women are not viewed as human beings with feelings and emotions. Because when those emotions are expressed, when concerns are voiced, it's like, no, y'all can take it, or let me address this other person who's more important, and then I'll get to whatever your thing is, right? So I think Black women who are vocal are a threat. Black women who are honest about their experience are a threat to the status quo. And it's not fair, right? Because when we accomplish things, when we experience joy, it's silenced. When we don't experience joy, it is amplified, right? Angela Bassett, who has had a storied career and should have won an Academy Award for playing Tina Turner. But anyways, when she lost to Jamie Lee Curtis at these past Academy Awards, like she was visibly sad, right? She was not happy about it. She was not clapping for the person who just beat her. And that's okay, right? But she was scrutinized for not being a good sport. Like, why is it that she as a Black woman is not allowed to express that she's sad, right? She lost, right? She should be able to convey that without being ridiculed, without being told to smile, right? As folks like to tell women to do. So I think all of this just speaks to the ways in which society wants to control Black women. And when they see that Black women are not subject to their control, not something that they can control, now it's let's dehumanize them until they go back to their place, right? Which is that subordinate space where they're silent and not advocating for themselves. So yeah, I think it speaks to this larger societal expectation that Black women are less than.
Well, I do want to say that it wasn't a coincidence why I chose y'all specifically for this discussion. Obviously you both are very intelligent women of color, but beyond that, you're experts in this topic. So I wanted to also let the audience know that, you know, I chose these two because they are experts in this and not just because of some type of bias and whatnot. Of course, people are going to come with biases, but they're experts in their field. So I want that to be, you know, crisp and clear. And so before we get to closing thoughts from the both of you, I just want to say for those who claim to not see, you know, color, you know, the fact of the matter is, you know what it is and you know what it ain't, right? You already know what you see in front of you. And so when you do see somebody of color, in particular a Black person, in particular a Black woman that is in a position of success, sometimes you just got to recognize that that is a Black woman that you see, and you don't have to insert your negativity upon that person. Just let them enjoy their moment, that very small moment of joy, and just let them celebrate their accomplishments. You know, that whole ego, that masculine ego of having to insert yourself and say, oh, well, this, that, and then, you know, that person can in fact meet all those requirements that you ask of them, and then you're going to move the goalpost and then try to add another thing to it. I think Toni Morrison was the one who said it. There's always another thing, right? And so that's an unfortunate reality of our society. But I just want to let the folks know at home that, you know, just because we got, you know, the First Amendment rights of free speech doesn't mean we always got to say some shit, right? So, you know, I just want that to marinate it for the folks at home that, you know, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And, you know, just because I'm telling you you can't doesn't mean I'm taking away your rights too. So do whatever you want with it, use whatever you want with that information, but ultimately, I'm just providing some guidance here. So with that said, for all the young women of color and just all the young women, little girls out there that are watching this, that are inspired by seeing someone that looks like them in your positions, what are some words of motivation that you have for them, especially in these times when, you know, sometimes the world isn't really the nicest place for them or nice to them?
I would say to just like never give up and be true to yourself, especially as Black women, but like also women of color. The world can be very unforgiving and cruel, but uh, as long as you have like a strong community and you have the goals that you want to accomplish and that you know that you're being a good person or doing the things that you want that make you happy, you kind of learn to like silence the noise around you. So I would say like keep working hard, keep being true to yourself. But yeah, get a community that supports you, that has your back, that can help lift you up through, you know, all the negativity and stuff. But like specific to Black women, like Black women are special and we deserve to be celebrated and to be happy. So honestly, like who cares what people think? Like everyone's always gonna have something to say, but like as long as you're killing it, then you're gonna have haters, right? If you don't have haters, you're not popping. That's what they say. That's what I have to say.
Yeah, I echo all of that and say like Black women in particular, like find those pockets of joy, those moments of joy and like sit in them. Like I want Angel Reese to ride this joyous wave as long as she wants to, right? Even if that means, you know, she's riding it until next year's championship game and they don't make it that far. Like I still want her to be sitting in the joy that she feels right now. Because those moments don't happen often for us, unfortunately. And when they do, we're criticized or we're told to minimize our celebration, minimize our joy. And to that, I say, you know, when the critics tell you to stop doing something, like you do that shit harder, you know, like just because you can, one, and two, because that's just going to irritate them. And that's enjoyable for me, right? So like find those pockets of joy, find your community to celebrate that joy with, and just continue to be like your authentic self in whatever spaces that you're entering, right? Like wear your hair how you want to, do your makeup how you want to, wear whatever clothes you want to. Don't allow society's definitions of beauty, of femininity, of any of the things define who you are unless you align with those definitions, right? Unless those are definitions that you yourself also hold. Do not allow anybody to shape who you are in a negative way, right? That would be the biggest piece of advice, like just to continue to be your authentic self. And for the folks who constantly have something to say when Black women are out here thriving and doing our thing, shut up, please, because nobody asked you, right? Like, if you're not going to say something positive, if you are not going to say something developmental, you could always shut your mouth, right? And let us continue doing what we're doing. If you see us about to make a mistake, allow us to make that mistake and keep it pushing, right? Let us live our lives in ways that are authentic to us, in ways that feel genuine, in ways that feel joyous, because we deserve. Yeah.
So the big takeaway of this, if you're somebody who has nothing good to say and you happen to have a basketball with you, you could just shut up and dribble. But anyway, I appreciate you both joining GW University today to speak on this very timely topic. And next time there's another something that pops off in college sports, we know who to talk to, right? So yeah, thanks again, and we'll definitely see each other next time.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank
Let me
you.